Grove, where do you know where the line is?
I think it's the actual on Market Street,
Is
because
it
my
Market
grandmother
Street?
taught at Market School, and all the diamonds went.
Okay, so the diamonds came over the ridge. They came over the ridge from Yeagerville, the Yeagerville side.
Bird diamond, Clarence.
See, I like this. I get to call people and ask them questions. You don't get to sit on the bench. You could be benched.
No, there we
There
are.
we go, you are all set.
Are we set? Good, I got my back.
You're recording and you are out live on YouTube.
Thank you. We thank Mr. Baden for helping us. You're gonna stay with us, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, so I was reading from Ann Smith Waves's paper here, statement to me. I called her back in May for this, by the way. And she says, for my first year, her teacher was Mr. Darling. There were 8 grades attending when I first started. By the time the new teacher, Mrs. Clara Margaret Weinkoop, came to teach, there were only 6 kids. Each day after the first, I walked to school with Donnie and Jimmy Masita. They walked to Dio's at the bottom of Cherrytown to wait to ride the bus to the high school in Perhams. I continued on to Pataukunk School. A few years later, my brother Otis started school and walked with us. There was only one time in all the years that I went to school in Pataukunk that I did not walk home. The weather was so bad, my uncle Henry Smith came to pick me up. Now, this is one of those stories where, yeah, it's all downhill going to and all uphill going back. So it must have been a really messy day for Uncle Henry to come with a vehicle to pick Ann up. Oh yeah, Henry's my uncle. Each day we carried our lunches with us. If there was not enough bread baked from home for our lunches, my mother would give me a dime to go to Twilliger's store next door and buy a loaf of bread. This could be used for our lunches, and the rest had to be brought home. She says the bell cord hung by the entry door. It was rung each day to call children to school. Our bathrooms were outhouses. As we entered the school, we left our coats and lunches in the coat room. Then we took our seats at the desk in the middle, at the desks around the edge of the room. The desks were placed around a coal stove for heat. In the front of the room, I'm sorry, there was the chalkboard and benches. The benches were used to call individual grades up for teaching. The teacher would ask questions about the study subject, and if we answered incorrectly, we moved to the end of the bench, moving forward if someone else answered incorrectly. There were chores to do each day. The older boys carried the water crock right there and to Dio's to fill with our drinking water for the day. Each of us took turns with these chores. The teacher kept the coal stove loaded with the coal for heat. Our teachers made sure we were always safe at school. They looked after us and guided us. And some of the people that she remembered attending Pataukunk School was Harriet Saylor, Gilbert Schloss, Betty DeWitt, Catherine Dio, Bob Brooks, Emma Simpson, and Marion Simpson. And that is the end of her memories for this. Now, I have people that were originally asked if they would like to speak, and I'd like to have them come up.
Can you
Yes.
identify yourself for the Zoom audience?
Oh, yes. Hi, where am I? Mic up there? Over there. Okay. My name is Beatrice Cole, prior to getting married twice. Haugen Depew. I'm better than Judge Othermore, although not as state. So if we could, I'd like to start with Helen Markle, if she would come up and tell some stories. She was asked originally. No, you're not. Come on up. This is Helen Markle. You can come up here. Yes, right here,
Yes, it's right here.
right there. Very good. And maybe. I don't need that.
Okay. Oh, wasn't Pataukunk glorious? Place between the Sampsonville Road and the Clay Hill Road. I will travel from Oscar Gray's house on the Clay Hill Road to Takio's gas station. Next, after Oscar Gray's house was the Ampersat Farm, right? Which took in summer borders, then the George Demarest house. There was with Alice, George, Bobby, and David. The place was the best place to go. David and Bob had a tree house. Alice made the best homemade cookies and cakes. Plus, when we caught frogs in the pond across the road, she let us cook the frog legs in her kitchen. George would take us kids swimming in summer over to the creek by Stubby's Guns. I believe we called it Steins, and taught us how to swim. After the Demarest homestead came the Waggle place. Across from that was the Rothstein Farm. They also took in summer boarders and later housed farm hand help from Pennsylvania from Borrow Acres. On the corner was Eric and Sylvia Gumberg's place, where I remember Helen and Eric, children of Eric and Sylvia, before they were married. And Mary Lou, you have pictures, don't you, of anyone? Old Eric worked at Lake Minnewaska, Sylvia homemaker that made the best rolls in Danish I could remember. Eric loved to sneak, this is old Eric, he used to love to sneak up in the wild for a beer. And one day he walked past her house to the tavern, Miller's had it been. And he saw me playing outside. So he said, Helen, you got to come home and see Sylvia. He knew he was going to get in trouble. So happily I went. Helen married Harry Osterhout, had 2 children, Howard and Carl. Ruth Osterhout married Eric, and they had 5 children, Sharon, Karen, Mary Lou, Wayne, and Eric. There was no dwelling, and I helped, when Eric built that house, I helped build the back part. I used to go down every day. And with the cinder blocks he was putting up. Remember the heating thing he had in the middle? Anyway, then there was the dwelling place between Gumberg's, Clay Hill Road, and Sampsonville Road, where Harry Kahn had a summer house. That's now Vandermark Lane. Across from Gumberg's, there was a pond, and Eric and Ruth Gumberg built a house when he came back from the service. I babysat for them, helped lay for a foundation for the home addition in my teenage years. We ate a lot of garden fresh tomato sandwiches, drank Miller beer out of bottles. Also listened and watched George Gobel on TV. Eric had about the only TV in Pataukunk, and also a new Henry J. car. And he used to pack all those kids. They had no laundry or anything. We used to ride over to Harry and Elmer, or to Harry Osterhouse over here, Flossie and Elmer's. Okay. Let's go now. Next house was Uncle Andrew and Aunt Laura Simpson. And then in those days, everybody was aunt and uncle. Everybody was aunt and uncle. It's a large house. They took in kids. There was Lorraine, Betty DeWitt, Douglas Simpson, Bonnie and Billy O'Connor, and Arlene. I love to go there in the summer. All the kids brushed their teeth over the railing. And also we threw stuffed animals at the bats, caught lightning bugs. We played softball in the road, using their big tree as second base. And Laura pierced all the girls' ears, all except mine. Mom wouldn't let me get mine. She also had a big catfish in the aquarium. And every Christmas always had a big pine tree. Then there was Uncle Jerry Quick, a small frame, old, sort of hunchback man lived with them. And across from their house was a vacant field with a good pear tree and pond that connected with ours. After they sold Nathan, well, knew I shouldn't have that drink. Nathan Millstone from New York bought it and made a boarding house for the city folk. Next come our house at the side of the road. It was a small 2-bedroom house, unfinished attic, no running water or bathroom. Had a pump in the kitchen where we got water out of the well. We burned coal and wood in the pond and back during the winter. We ice skated, built fires, and it was, I don't know what happened after that. Next door to Jim's, it was, oh, the next house is Aunt Mary and Uncle Bert's home. They had Marion and Buddy, Emma and Beverly. Aunt Mary had a car with a running board and would take us to town. I remember Marion getting married and moving to Woodstock. I remember Patty being born with a cleft palate. I remember Buddy joining the Navy, married, children, and Emma going into nursing. The next house at the intersection of Craig Hill and Sampsonville Road was May Stratton's house, right? May Stratton. You don't remember that? Well, that's where Alice Brooks moved into. She sold it to High and Margaret Brooks with their children, Bob and Alice. Alice and I became very good friends. Our mailbox was on the corner. Harry Smith was our mail carrier, right? Harry Smith. Eleanor Borger's father. Then was Miller's Bar and Grill, where the whole town lived. Was it Miller's? Years ago, right? Without their daughter, let me see. Later, it was sold to Leah Mae Johnson from Canada with her daughter Marion, then to High and Margaret Brooks, and after that, I don't know. I can't remember. It was too fresh in my mind. Let's see. Okay, then I remember this. Boy, I tell you. Where was the tavern again? I got
Same place it was, same place.
when I
it
was
is today.
there. Aunt Mary and Uncle Bert Simpson. Next was a lovely brick home. Oh, it was vacant, but then Marion Johnson married Al and moved in there. Next was Ben Lee and Marie Allison. Had a trailer. They had a baby Linda. And across the road was a bungalow colony. And when the summer folk left in September, Alice and I used to go play handball at the court. Next was Ruth and Takio's house. They had a son named Stanley. Had cows and a gas station. Next to their house was Ruth's sister Jean Denley's house. She had a daughter named Shirley, an older daughter named Jean, who married Junie Connaughton. And Ta opened part of his garage in Hillsborough. Up the hill was Anna Poole and Mrs. Carr's place. And Rex Walters lived with them, the big kid that bullied me in first grade. Remember him?
I remember Rex.
Then I remember when they all went in the service, Buddy Simpson and I can't remember now. I didn't write it down. Buddy Simpson and all of them. And I remember her mother and father getting married. I remember Buck coming home from the service. I just remember, and I remember then Jake and Neva's store. They used to always go across over to the store. We walked all over the neighborhood, all over the hills, right? All over. It was just a nice little hamlet town for us to grow up. We could go way back in the woods, no problems, and not be afraid. It was really, remember Raymond the Indian used to be there?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And Lily of the Valley.
Lily of the Valley was a teacher. She was a teacher, and back in the day, they did not know what was wrong with her. She walked from from the Olive Line down by us. She had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
People never knew what Alzheimer's was back then. she would come sometimes as we got out of school, or I got out of school. Mommy would have her come in the house and we all had to get in bed. She wanted to tuck us in so we could go to sleep at night, and she wanted to know that we were in bed. So 4 o'clock, we all ran, well, 2 of us at that point, went into our beds and got into bed. So Miss Lily could put us to bed and be satisfied. And Mommy would usually give her something to eat and she would go on her way.
And then when Rothstein's took, when Browakers come up to pick, they went to your house, a lot of them, Shirley's mom
Yes.
and dad.
Yes.
And then Olive Moore lived on the corner. Olive Moore had a restaurant over there.
You mean a boarding house?
Boarding house, yep. And she had a jukebox in there, and I remember when I was a kid, I used to love to go there, and she had, on the jukebox was a song, I got freckles, she had freckles on her butt, she is nice. And I loved it, and she must have been the best. And do you know that that's what they played in my boarding house? That's all I had. That I lived in Pataukunk for 16 years until I got married. I didn't have to, but my mother and father gave up housekeeping for my. That's true.
I would like Helen to explain one more thing.
What's that?
Would you explain what a skimelton is?
A skimelton was a shower.
A
It
shower.
was a shower when they got married. Oh, and I remember that your dad and when they used to play music.
Yes.
Oh, my God. It's such good memories, such good memories. It really was. And I lived down in Bessington, so I remember for Gophers.
Oh, that was a
Gophers were there.
horrible day.
It's all in your life.
That was a horrible day.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
Nice
that's
work,
all I
Bill.
have.
Nice
That's
work. Very good.
Oh,
Computer. Play it.
So what?
I just found that song on the
play the
computer.
song for us.
Sing the song.
No, she's gonna play it. for
He
you.
said, "Oh, Mary, no, you should share that. Oh, this is beautiful, you guys. Absolutely. Mary Lou has this, did she share it with everybody?
Just one thing, it says 1932 on the back.
Come on, you guys don't think else. Did you see this picture?
Yes, I have.
Here we go.
All right, here's your song, Helen.
Oh. She's got freckles on her butt. She is nice. When I hold her in my arms, it's paradise. She's got freckles on her butt.
It's not.
On her butt. Did you have?
No, won't play it. It won't play it on it.
Okay, won't play the audio for us, but Helen did a great job. You did. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
It's good.
Thank you. Do it again. Mr. Demarest, are you going to speak with us today? Do you have stories would you like to speak? Sure, come sit. Yes, anything. Come on.
Come on, Bob.
I'll just.
Okay, no more.
This is Robert Demarest.
My wife.
That's one. Okay,
Uh,
so tell us.
Well, there's a couple little things. Clara Margaret was a teacher. And she come to my mother and she said, Bobby should come to school. I wasn't old enough yet, because we were going to go to the big school in Kerhonkson. And she said, you should let him come over and go to school. And so anyway, there was a couple issues at school. One thing I remember, which kind of stuck with me, I did something wrong. And she took me up and put me under the desk.
Yeah.
And that's where I spent, the time under the desk, which was a little, unusual. And anyway, that was one issue in school. I wasn't really going to school, but she thought that I should go to school. So when I went to the big school in Carhonson, I wouldn't be so shy.
Her version of preschool.
Yeah. And
Another,
then we were in the first, well, I was in the first grade then.
you
at
were,
her school.
I don't think I officially went to the first grade in Pataukunk.
Yeah.
But I did go to get used to it.
To the homemade.
The other little issue, my brother, he was going to school and he was
Yeah.
2 years older. And one day at school, he had this brainstorm. He said, I'm going out to the bathroom. And you come out maybe, 10 minutes later and we're going home. So these were outhouses, So he went out, and I went out, we got out there, we took off down the field. We didn't dare go home, so we spent the afternoon in a field somewhere waiting to go home. But I don't know, there was no issue or never got in trouble for it. But that was the two best things I remember. I think that's about it.
Did you ever go to any of the square dances at DO's?
We used to walk up there and stand outside,
Okay.
okay, when we were kids, and they hadn't, and they hadn't square dances and that. But yeah, we were, we were really rugrats running around. Geez, swimming over there in the science field there. It was a good place to grow up. That's about, the end of my interesting stories.
No.
You know something? I will say something.
Okay, I would like to introduce Marshall Berlin, Mr. Berlin.
I have sort of a magic story to tell you, because I was a New Yorker, the original New Yorker, only as somebody born in Milwaukee can be, because I couldn't wait to get out of there. It was everything I hated all in one part. A nice Jewish boy living in a town with more Germans than Hamburg during the Second World War. Everybody was sort of looking around, and the FBI was crawling around everywhere. It was not a happy place. So I came to New York and to seek my fortune, and I had 11 jobs in my first 7 years. I got fired from all of them. And I was a writer, and I tried to do my work and everything. And finally, I landed at Vogue magazine, and they thought that I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I got very high, and they sent me to Paris, London, and Rome 3 times a year to do the collections. And I got all sorts of things happening. And then I suddenly got tired of having all of this publicity and everything. And that really wasn't me, because I was still that kid from Milwaukee. And so on one rainy weekend, May 7th, 1967, I decided that I would go out and buy a house, because I had been saving my money. And I would go out and buy a house in nowhere, New York. And I looked in the New York Times, and it said, colonial house for sale, Carhonson, room for a couple horses and a large family house. And so a friend of mine had a car and he drove me up to New York, up to Kerhonkson. I'd never seen Kerhonkson or even heard about it. I couldn't even pronounce it. And we drove across 4455, and I had never seen anything more beautiful. It looked like Switzerland, and it was just absolutely terrific. And we drove up the hill, up Clay Hill Road, into the driveway. And the real estate agent was a guy who's moved to Virginia Beach called Chick O'Brien, and it was the United Farm Agency. And it was Bob and George's house, but I didn't meet them then. And this was 56 years ago, in 1967. And I looked at the house and I said, I'll take it. And O'Brien said, do you want to see the basement? And I said, sure. I'm sure it's there. And we went down the basement and I didn't know nothing from nothing. Had lived in the city. I had no idea how to saw a piece of wood or what there was a 2x4 and a 1x2. And I just bought it. And that more or less was the beginning of the happiest time of my life. I worked in New York. I was very successful and I was able to retire by 1995. I've been retired for a third of my life. And I gave up my apartment in New York, which was very snazzy, halfway between Park Avenue and Sutton Place. And I didn't have any need to stay there because I was home in Kerhonkson, in Pataukunk, really. And Bob and I became best friends, I think, the week that I moved in. And for 56 years, we have never had an unpleasant word. And we both had places in Florida. And we spent Thanksgiving and Christmas together in Florida, not in Kerhonkson. And it looks like the police are going to come and get me.
No, we won't let them.
No,
Anyway,
Thanks, Mark.
this is the happiest time, and it's Pataukunk in the second generation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Wayne, would you like to have anything? Nope, he's not going to. He knows. Well, I have a couple of stories, or since my cousin isn't here to tell it, I was going to let her tell it. That would be Karen D.O. Osterhout. And she knew Uncle Tot as well as I did, and Aunt Ruth. And then there was Irene and Warren D.O. Also. But Tot and my Uncle Tot, my Uncle Buck D.O., my father, somewhere back under the hills, you know, my dad played music for the square dances. And somewhere tucked under one of those hills, they had refreshments that they kept in this special container thing with a foil on the top and things like that. And a fire underneath. I'm not sure how often they went to collect, but I'm pretty sure on square dance night, there was some of that medicinal purpose in the punch. And I know the Teslers had one because the federal government found Tesla, but they never found my dad's and my uncle's still. So I know that existed back in the hills somewhere, or maybe it was down in the barn. I don't know, but it was close enough but far enough that they could get to it quick and bring it back for the square dance.
I think it was Grandpa Buckhead's song.
It might have been something to do with Uncle Sawmill. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they didn't hide it somewhere in the ground.
Tesla's first boxes up the road to
Yeah. So we did have sawmills there. My uncle had a sawmill that moved. Bucky had a sawmill that he moved. He had it down on Aunt Irene's. And not that that means anything to you, but as you go up Lower Cherrytown Road and you look where the antique equipment is now, my uncle Buck had a sawmill there. Then he moved it up on the ridge above Tesler. So I say whoever buys that piece of property better look in the ground for the doodle bug that worked as the generator to run the sawmill. It was a portable sawmill. I'm sure I think it was left there. I'm not too sure, but I remember walking to it and they always used a doodle bug. Now doodle bug I'm not exactly sure. So let me see. Billy, can you explain what a doodle bug is? No? Yes? And they used them to run the sawmill.
They use it for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Tractors.
Tractors.
It's a battery.
No, run just like a car. Only hit a belt.
Because I don't know the mechanics of it. My dad kept everything running. And I was told the story here this day that when my father, being he liked money, my dad. He liked to earn money, and I was told that he would go on his bike with his toolbox. This was just told to me a little bit ago, and fix people's radios. Well, when he got older, in the house that he built, he also built himself a radio shack, so to speak, where he would go and fix tube radios, and I would go down there. He would, be soldering and working. He worked at Channel Master for however many years. I know that. He was raised in Kerhonkson, Mombakas and Kerhonkson, and then moved to Pataukunk and married my mom.
So Bea, what were the biggest industries in our area, aside from farming and running stores and things like that? Was Channel Master got up and running?
Channel
What
Master,
other-
the Knife Factory,
Chicken
Bluestone
farms.
Quarry,
Chicken farm, we had a lot of chicken
chicken farms, Bluestone Quarries. The summer was your bungalows, your bungalow colonies and things like
Barrow
that.
Bakers was a big business in our neighborhood.
Potatoes and farm goods came from Barrow Acres. Barrow Acres kept their potatoes in Mrs. Collier's house now. And they had immigrants come in each season and sort the potatoes and things like that. And I'm not sure what else they kept there. I just remember potatoes.
And I understand, is Mrs. Colliers' house the big stone house?
Big stone house on the hill.
It had migrant workers in it for a long time.
Yes, it was formerly John, Jenny, and Grace Schoonmaker's home. And they rented to an English couple, Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. And he either had a black Model A or a black Model T. Now, my brother would know that. I don't know the difference in the two cars, but the Brookses had a car. So they could take John, Jesse, Jenny, and Grace shopping if they needed. And I was only allowed in the kitchen in any of these homes. So I have no idea, or I had to sit on the front porch. So I really never was allowed, seriously. We were not allowed in the houses as kids. Just weren't. Why? Yeah. The parents were talking. The parents and the adults were talking, and the children stayed outside. And you better find something to keep yourself busy, because if you had to be spoken to, you were sitting on the porch then. You were not going anywhere. It was a time when people watched their children. They didn't run thither and yon. And you best not be spoken to. It was better to avoid that. Yeah.
We had the Krug's Baker man, the truck.
Yes.
Homer Lancaster used to go pick the apples and peddlers.
Peddlers.
Yeah.
That's fish, yeah.
The shad man. My mother would
shad
always
man,
buy shad. And
Yeah,
bacon.
Yep.
That's.
Yeah.
What is the origin of the word Pataukunk? Apparently it's Indian,
It's
right?
Indian, and I am not familiar.
Anybody
with that.
knows?
Mr. Grasso, Mark's gonna find that for us.
That's a big call on spot, but I do know he knows a lot of the Native American history with the Pataukunk area as well.
Okay.
And it is very rich in Native American history, but I have to go. This has been great.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
See you on Monday.
Billy, you wanna give us an education?
Oh, please. About 2 years ago, I wrote a recording with what that and read through that, and it just discusses our
the history of the area, pre-European, and then, and those effects, there's the culture that was here, the native communities. We knew the English and Dutch, the English knew them as the Delaware Indian, Native American, but the indigenous people call themselves the Lenape. And there was a Munsee tribes of the Delaware Nation in this area. Names like Wilworson, Pataukunk, Pataukunk, they're all the native names for our area that still resonate today. And so kind of one takeaway from the article I wrote was that, you know, we think of when the Dutch came to this area, the English came here, and they would view anything that was from like early west of Kingston as a wilderness. They had no idea what was out there. They just knew anybody was out there. They didn't come back. And but that was the home of these Native American population for hundreds of years prior to this families. Yeah.
You know what it means?
I do, I have it. So, Pataukunk in native means, Patauk means prayer, and Kunk means waterfalls. And the saying was waterfalls where we make our prayers. Is what Pataukunk stands for. Stubby Duns.
Stubby Duns.
The summer's water.
Like Medica Hawks, it's the street that follows on the shape of pine, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different, the language, the language of the Native Americans. A lot of research. I think read that, the article kind of lays out a lot.
That was William DeGraw, by the way. He owns his grandparents' farm. A whole bunch of us didn't leave too far from the area when we grew up.
So I'm just like kind of where I am up there. We're my kids are 8th generation on the farm. They have a map, the visual survey map of 1840 that has the house on. Built somewhere in 1810s. Kind of one of the first, the 3 years from my grandmother, my mother's family. And my grandmother ready for was a teacher over in Box. I'll do it. If you thought, I know a lot of some folks had her, she's such a good down in her house.
She rode the school bus with us.
She rode to school, but my mother was so happy.
That's great, thanks. Does anyone else want to speak?
Shirley.
You want to speak? Sure.
I'm sure.
Come on, Shirley.
Saying.
I don't know.
I mean, where did Cherrytown Pataukunk separate? Because I sometimes get mail, the 12446 zip code, but it says Cherrytown instead of Kerhonkson. And I was just wondering where Cherrytown is. Yes.
Billy, where's the Cherrytown Pataukunk one?
Cherrytown.
Billy's the expert.
It's right, actually, it's just on the top of the hill on our farm because
That's what I
the
thought.
civic camp is now down the Baker's farm. And Ross Baker, who married my great aunt, the story of our road is, my grandmother was a Green. They grew up in Cornelius's house across the Baker Road. They just rebuilt it. It's a Green house. That's where my grandmother's family was from. And all the girls married everybody up and down the road. Freers, Bakers, and so Alice Demarest, that's sugar cookies, and I still have the recipe my grandmother. So that one, so there was a set of camp bakers at that location. And my mother actually started.
I remember a lot of us too, a lot of our families there didn't have telephones. We would go to, the neighbors' houses and the stores, J. Pulliger's store, and then Henry Berger's come back.
Vanette, 19, Vanette.
Names after, but
Yeah, what were all the little businesses? The Willigers, and he
Vanette.
had a store, he had a trucking company, and he farmed. So, Yeah, I brought a little folder with some of his paperwork.
I have, a calendar.
Yeah.
From the store from 1940.
Yeah.
My house across the road was a store. We have a picture
Yes.
of the Venettons that lived there then, and had a
Silas
store.
Benetton and Sarah.
Nineteen 37, when that was a store.
Where Morgan's wasn't a story.
Yes, it was.
Morgan,
Yes, that was Henry Berger.
Henry Berger.
And he married, Hamilton married Bessie Berger.
Yes.
And then they in turn sold it, Earl, his second wife, to Morgan.
And Clara Margaret, did she live in that house a long time?
Oh, very long.
Long time.
Up until she could no longer be there, actually.
She really did tax, wrote the news and did.
She wrote for the press, for the Journal in Ellenville. She did income tax. She taught school in Woodridge. Besides in Pataukunk. When she left Pataukunk, she went to school work in Liberty and Monticello and Woodridge. And her mother lived in the back house growing up. I still have grandma's dominoes. Oh my God, yes. Her and my mother, yeah.
And her house is for sale.
I think it's sold.
It's sold. It's sold.
It's sold. John told me it was sold a couple weeks ago.
So don't you have any more stories?
I think the worst two stories I could ever tell you was, I was probably, how old was I, Helen? I was young and we had gone to get the Sunday papers and we had papers across the street, was the Gogels.
Yes.
And we were going down Sampsonville Road on a Sunday morning to get the Sunday paper, and my father said to my brother John, cover her eyes. And it was too late. I saw it. The Gogol son had gotten hit on the bicycle, killed at Messenger's.
Yeah, I lived in Messenger's.
That was, I think that's the worst memory I have of the book ever. Because Stanley was a little bit older than me, and Bobby was, Gogol was your age, Bob. You all went to school together.
Yeah.
And it was the most tragic thing that ever happened, except the pipe factory fire.
What's that?
On top of Congressman Hill, you don't remember, you were here for the pipe factory fire.
I just
When they
remember.
evacuated. Oh, yeah, then there was a tornado, 1963. We just got to school that morning. And I was in school at the Osterhout building, which used to be the laundromat on Clay Hill Road and School Road. And I got home that afternoon from school, and all it did in Cohunson was rain like crazy. And we got home that afternoon and there was trees down and it had blown a hole through Amelia's house, through one end of that front porch, out the other end of the front porch.
So that was Jake's house.
Yes, in his house, and it was horrible. It had taken their well house in the front,
Right.
down towards the outhouse, and it had blown out some trees. It had made a terrible mess. It took down our apple tree, and it took down Clara Margaret's great big tree in her yard. And it made a whole hell of a mess of talk, just a section.
Isn't that something here?
And there's pictures. And
There are pictures on
And-
that board.
And then I was at a town board meeting not long ago, and Mr. Baden made a comment about, it looks like the courthouse had been lifted up and sat back down. And I thought a second, I said, the tornado that went through, it's exactly in line where the corner of the courthouse had literally been lifted up and sat back down. Because it only could have hit that end of the courthouse.
So we redid the bathroom recently there on the back side of that building. When they got down underneath, and that's what they discovered, and we thought maybe somebody had, like in snow removal, had lifted it, caught it with a front end loader and picked it up. Shirley said, no, I think that, and I think actually
Because if you
your
look,
suggestion makes a lot of
Amelia's porch,
sense.
Right.
it went right through one end, it never touched the front of the house, or the back of the, the inside wall of the house, or the front of the porch. Just went down through there straight, and it's exactly in line with the corner of the building because it's damaged. And it went no further than that, though. That was the weird
It
part.
just kind of came down.
It followed that little line of fresh air. But, we used to play in the road. We used to play badminton and baseball in the road. And you could get a whole gate in and never see a car.
I know, even in 1976, when we moved up, my toddler walked across Clay Hill Road because someone wasn't watching. You know, no problem, safest
We
house.
never locked our doors. Now,
Forget about it.
2 years ago, I had the state troopers there twice in 2 weeks telling me, keep your doors locked. There's a lot of crap going on up the street, you know, and now, you know,
Case around.
we never locked our doors. Never. We sat there one night, my father was working in a snowstorm, and this man walked in the house. I mean, he walked right through the house. Is Ray home? I said, he might be if you were in the right house. Now get out of here. You're never afraid there. They're never afraid there.
No, that's what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Lily's the Valley.
Never
and-
afraid.
And there was another man by the name of Sailor. He was a sailor. He attended the bar quite regularly and would get lost or
Yeah.
end up at the wrong house.
Never.
And, but we didn't shut doors. We didn't lock
And the
doors.
other bad experience in Pataukunk many years later was the Pine Grove fire, where everybody lost their lives. In Stubby's barn. I got in
That was
trouble.
Halloween that Stubby's
I got
barn
in trouble
burned.
that night.
I turned that fire in and young Mr. Demrith, I turned that fire in and the person I was talking to said, it's Halloween, quit playing a prank. And I said, I'm not playing a prank. My father just left here in his car and it's burning.
That was a bad one.
That was very bad. No, that was stuff.
My barn burned too.
Yeah.
Oh, that was horrible. You know, that cracked my kitchen windows. It was so hot. in there.
There's a few,
There's that piece burnt.
Yeah. like Phillips' house.
Right, so-
We had our share of fires.
Some diamond pulled him out of the house.
Yes, I remember.
I was a kid when I was working, you would remember the Boyceville Road, across
Yeah.
Boyceville and the house that burned.
Was
Those
that Galvin
diamond
Reynolds'
pulled
old
off.
house?
Yeah, it was, I was, I said.
Hi, Gallery.
Yeah, but the still standing house that's in Pataukunk. And I guess it was a woman and her 2 or 3 kids were alone, asleep, and he ran in and got them out.
Where was
Was that the property you
You
had?
know, right
Boy-
where Boyceville comes
Where the
out on the
horse
fence,
pit-
Yeah.
right there, there's
Oh.
a house.
Okay.
Now it's.
Where Austin is. Wasn't Dougie Diamond involved in that?
Yeah, he's the one, he saw the smoke. and
Right, he was a trooper then.
He stopped his car, he was coming off duty, went in and said.
I want everyone to
Gosh.
stay and visit, but
Lucky.
I would like to read something that I put together just to tell you the difference in schools today. Today, we have special classrooms for special needs students. We have all of these things. But in the 1930s, and when there were one-room schools, there were no special needs for children. And I would like to read this story of a student from Pataukunk's one-room school. Catherine started school in 1932 at 5 years old. She continued at Pataukunk doing well in school. In 1936, at the age of 9 in 4th grade, she was stricken with a severe case of scarlet fever. Upon returning to school, she was unable to complete the 4th grade. It was discovered that the high fever had caused learning disabilities and difficulties. Now the year is 1937 and Catherine is 10 and still in 4th grade. The scenario continued for another 6 years. Can you imagine being in school, in the same classroom, remaining in the same grade, watching your friends move forward while you're staying at the same level? And like I started this with, you see, there was no special education or help for those with disabilities in a one-room schoolhouse. At the age of 16, with the doctor's authorization, Catherine was allowed to leave school. She never gave up. She went back to work on her family's farm, helping with the chores, raising chickens and other animals. I believe it was in 1940 or 41, her father passed away, and then her brother went on into the army, leaving her and her mother at home. She never gave up. When she was old enough, She went to work at Charade Cutlery. She worked there until she met and married a young man in Pataukunk. She and her husband stayed in Pataukunk. Catherine gave birth to 3 children. She taught them respect and love for all living things. But the most important was to never make fun of anyone struggling. Help them if you can. She would say, you do not have to have a high school education to be kind to them. Many of these very important principles get lost in today's society. But Catherine learned these ideals from what she went through in life at school. Catherine may not have been able to learn all the school had to teach, but she taught great lessons in life. It is my honor to have been able to learn from Catherine. She was my mother. With that, we would ask you to visit, talk, learn, and have some coffee, tea, and refreshments.
There's lots of refreshments here, everyone has contributed, and this is, as I said before, the second of the series of Hamlet Talks. The next one will be sometime in 2024, we're beginning with Algerville. So please enjoy your.
Thank you.